Capitulum XXVI, Daedalus et Icarus, Lecture 4, versus sexagesimus primus, usque versum 80 Daedalus icitur, arte mirabili, sibi et filio suo allas ingentes confecit ex pennis, quas cera iungsit et in lacertis fixet. So Daedalus, made by his wonderful craft, huge wings for himself and for his son, out of feathers, which he joined with wax and attached to their upper arms. Igitur, postpositive, inferential, sort of resumptive here. Arte mirabili, ablative of means, though it's not a concrete means, but an abstract means. His skill, his craft. Sibi, et filio suo in the third line. In the dative case, allas ingentes, the direct object of confecit, which is in the perfect tense, and then the material out of which, out of feathers, penna, penne, then a relative clause beginning with the relative pronoun in the feminine plural accusative, quas, cera, notice the macron over the a, cera is in the ablative case, and then the verb iungo, iungere, iungsise, iunctum esse, iungsise, to have joined. Notice that Ørberg is giving you this verb in the perfect tense for the first time. He notes this in the margin, which he joined by means of wax, and then figere, fixisse, fixum esse. Another verb for the first time in the perfect tense, and attached onto, fixed onto their upper arms in lacertis. Postquam finem operis fecit, opus iam perfectum extinguit, ecce exemplum artis mee novissimum. Aves quidem non sumus, et aves imitabimur in volando. After temporal conjunction, after he made an end of the work, of the project, of the task. So, after he finished the job, the task is now complete, he says. Perfectum est. Again, perfect in form, passive in form, but because of the meaning of the verb, we can give it this present translation, though we don't have to. We could also say it has been completed. It is now complete. No longer is perficere happening, but it is perfectum. Opus operis neuter, third declension. Look, the novissimum exemplum, the latest, the most recent, the newest instance, example of my skill. Genitives there in the middle. Aves quidem non sumus. Indeed, to be sure, we are not birds, but we will imitate the birds, accusative case, in flying, in with the gerund in the ablative case. Vento celerius trans mare volabimus, nulla avis nos consequi poterit. We will fly more swiftly. Notice the comparative degree of the adverb. So we began this chapter by seeing this three-termination, third declension adjective, celer, celeris, celere. Shortly thereafter, we saw the adverb in the positive degree, celeriter, and here we see that same adverb in the comparative degree, more swiftly, celerius. The superlative would, of course, be celerime. So, more swiftly than the wind, the ablative of comparison. More swiftly than the wind. There's no then word here, no quam, but the ablative can do that work all by itself. We will fly, future tense, more swiftly than the wind, across the sea. No bird, nulla avis, will be able, future tense, to overtake us, to come up to us, to catch us. Consequi. Icarus studiosus volandi, allas huc illuc movet, nec se supra humum levare potuit. Ale me sustinere non possunt, inquit, tu doce me volare. Icarus, eager for flying, eager to fly. Studiosus again with the gerund in the genitive case. Moved his wings. Recall that in Latin the possessive adjectives will be used much more sparingly than in English, at least if the relationship of possession is clear from the context. Moved his wings hither and thither, huc illuc, to here and to there. Notice that Ørberg is showing us movere for the first time in the perfect tense. Movere, mo, with a long initial quantity, movise, motum, esse. He moved his wings hither and thither, but not, nec, but could not lift, raise, levare. Ørberg glosses that with the word tollere, lift himself, say, above the ground, supra humum. The wings cannot hold me up. Ale me sustinere non possunt. Subtenere, to hold up from underneath. He says, you, imperative, teach me to do the infinitive. You teach me to fly, or even how to fly, we could say. Statim Daedalus se allis levavit, et nisi allas recte moves, inquit, volare non potes. Imitare me, how difficiles est ars volandi, move allas sursum deorsum hoc modo. Immediately Daedalus lifted himself up with his wings and says, unless you move your wings correctly, you cannot fly. Imitate me. The art of flying is not at all difficult. Move your wings up and down in this way. Statim, an adverb meaning immediately. Levavit, perfect tense. Allis, ablative of means. Imitare, recall that that is a deponent verb, so we're seeing a passive imperative form there. In the fourth line, the gerund in the genitive case at the very end, the art of flying. Sursum deorsum. We probably know that word sursum from the Mass, right? The preface to the canon of the Mass. Sursum corda. Hold your hearts up. Deorsursum up. Deorsum down. Up and down. Just like we saw a moment ago. Huc illuc. Hither and thither. Sursum deorsum. Up and down. Hoc modo. Ablative of mode. In this way. Ita pater filium suum artem volandi docuit, tamquam avis pulos suos. Thus did the Father teach his Son the art of flying, just like a bird teaches its chicks. Docui, perfect tense. So long E family verb, docere, docuisse, doctumesse. The gerund in the third line, volandi, the art of flying, and tamquam again. Just like introducing a new sentence or clause, just like a bird teaches its chicks. Tum puerum osculatus. Parati sumus ad volandum inquit. Then, having kissed the boy, he says, we are ready to fly. Notice that osculari is a deponent verb, and so we are able to sneak in to Latin, in that situation, a perfect active participle. So osculatus is passive in form, but active in meaning. Having kissed, perfect in tense regardless. Having kissed that direct object there, puerum, he says, we are ready. We have finished getting ourselves, we are no longer getting ready. Non paramur, non paramus nos, sed parati. We have been gotten ready. We are now ready to do that gerund, to do that infinitival idea. We don't say ad volare, but just volandum after a preposition ad volandum. It's also possible to say ready to do the infinitive, but this is an ordinary construction, para, to be ready to do a thing, ad plus the accusative. Sed prius hoc te moneo. But beforehand, I warn you this. I admonish you in this respect. But we do have two direct objects. I warn this accusative, I warn the accusative, you, about of this other thing in the accusative, hoc. Vola post me in medio aere. Fly behind me in midair. That is, in the middle of the air, we would say in English. Inter caelum et terram. Between the heaven and the earth. Nam si in infimo aere prope mare volabis, pene umine fient. For if, and then notice the precise use of the tense with the future, where we in English would use a present tense, they use a future tense. For if you will fly in the lowest part, so a superlative degree of the adjective here, though it doesn't appear so immediately, inferus, inferior, inferius, and then infimos. So if you will fly in the lowest air near the sea, prope mare, pene umide fient, Your wings will become, fient, future tense, from the verb fieri, they will become wet. Sin, but if, sin volabis in summo aere prope caelum, but if you will fly in the highest air, that is, in the highest part of the air, near the heaven, ignis solis ceram moliat atque pennas juret, the fire of the sun, solus genitive case, will soften, future tense, the wax, and will burn, future tense, the wings. Noli nimis audax esse in volando. Don't be, negative imperative, do not be too daring in flight, in volando, the gerund in the ablative case. Cautus esto, mi fili, be cautious, my son. Iam sequere me. We do see here esto, and if you look in the margin of Ørberg's text, he also shows you estote. These are what are called second imperative forms, or sometimes future imperatives. All imperatives are really futuristic to some extent, as they're pointing to or expecting or demanding an action which, even if it happens a moment from now, is still future relative to the act of speaking. So it's probably more helpful to refer to these as second imperative forms. And they're very common in adages or laws or general pieces of advice that hold good indefinitely for the future. Also quite common with the verb esse. Not that they have to be used with esse. In the beginning of the book, we saw the imperative forms es laeta, be happy, este. But esto and estote, also very common. We may know the phrase esto vir, be a man. And maybe the second imperative could be justified in that situation from the perspective of that being a general piece of advice that's supposed to hold good for all times and circumstances, not just the immediate circumstance surrounding its utterance on a given occasion. We'll learn more about the second imperative forms later on, but as Ørberg often does, he's sprinkled in, before he comes to treat of it formally, some of these new forms. So, be cautious, my son. Now follow me, deponent verb. So a passive imperative in form, sequere me, carcerem nostrum effugimus. We escape. We do escape from the direct object. Our prison, liberi sumus. We are free.